New York City, November 25, 1869. Inside the bustling, brightly lit offices of the New York Tribune, located at the corner of Spruce and Nassau Streets, the air is thick with the smell of fresh ink and the frantic clattering of printing presses. Journalists are racing to finalize the next morning's edition. Among them is Albert Richardson, a highly celebrated 36-year-old Civil War correspondent, author, and senior journalist. He approaches the mail desk to collect his evening letters, entirely unaware that a shadow is tracking him through the glass partition. A door swings open. A short, disheveled man slips into the busy room. He wears a heavy overcoat and keeps his right hand buried deep in his pocket. He steps directly behind Richardson, pulls a heavy revolver, and screams a single, unintelligible word. Bang! The gunshot echoes like thunder through the newsroom. The bullet tears straight through Richardson's stomach. As the famous journalist stumbles backward, gasping for air and clutching his abdomen, the shooter doesn't run. He calmly lowers the smoking gun, looks around at the horrified staff, and proudly states exactly who he is. His name is Daniel McFarland. He is a failed, alcoholic lawyer, and the man he just shot is his ex-wife's new lover. But if the public thought this was a simple open-and-shut case of cold-blooded murder, they were completely wrong. Over the next 6 months, this tragedy would spiral into a national media circus. It would feature a tear-stained, dying bedside marriage officiated by the most famous ministers in America, and a legal defense so shocking it would establish a dangerous legal precedent that a husband's absolute property rights over his wife's body could justify a public execution. Welcome to Decades of Darkness. Today, we unearth the McFarland-Richardson trial of 1869, a dark milestone in American legal history where temporary insanity, media sensationalism, and Victorian systemic bias allowed a killer to walk out of a courtroom to a standing ovation. To understand the toxic rage that brought Daniel McFarland into that newsroom, we have to look back at a marriage built entirely on domestic horror. In 1857, a brilliant, creative 19-year-old woman named Abby Sage married Daniel McFarland. Abby was a highly educated, aspiring actress and elocutionist, while McFarland was a failing New York lawyer and real estate speculator. Almost immediately, the marriage dissolved into an absolute nightmare. McFarland was a raging, violent alcoholic who frequently suffered from dark, paranoid delusions. He burned through what little money they had, leaving the family entirely destitute. When Abby tried to work as an actress and public reader to feed their children, McFarland's jealousy turned dangerous. He would frequently lock her in their tenement rooms, violently assault her, and show up drunk at her theater rehearsals to scream insults at her directors. By 1867, after a decade of severe abuse, Abby reached her breaking point. With the secret financial assistance of her literary and theater friends, she packed her things and fled the household, taking refuge at a boarding house run by sympathetic reformers. It was during this period of newfound independence that Abby met Albert Richardson. Richardson was everything McFarland was not: handsome, deeply respected, wealthy, and a genuine hero of the Civil War who had survived a daring escape from a Confederate prison camp. The two fell deeply, genuinely in love. Richardson promised to protect Abby and marry her the moment she could secure a legal divorce. When Daniel McFarland discovered the relationship, his bruised ego and paranoid mind exploded. Under 19th-century American law, a wife was viewed essentially as a husband's legal property. In McFarland's eyes, Albert Richardson hadn't just fallen in love with a woman. He had stolen a valuable piece of McFarland's domestic estate. McFarland began a relentless, months-long stalking campaign across Manhattan. He carried a pistol everywhere he went, openly telling bartenders and strangers on the street that he intended to blow Richardson's brains out. In March 1867, McFarland caught up to the couple as they walked down a dark New York street. He pulled his gun and fired wildly into the dark. The bullet grazed Richardson's thigh, but the journalist chose not to press charges, desperately wanting to avoid a public scandal that would ruin Abby's reputation in polite society. Realizing New York's strict laws made divorce nearly impossible for women, Abby fled to Indiana, where she lived for the required residency period and successfully obtained a legal, binding divorce on the grounds of extreme cruelty and non-support. She returned to New York a free woman, ready to build a life with Richardson. But Daniel McFarland flatly refused to recognize the Indiana divorce. To him, she was still his property, and Richardson was still a thief. This all culminated on the rainy night of November 25, 1869. After spending the afternoon drinking heavily in Lower Manhattan, McFarland marched into the New York Tribune offices, located the man who had given his ex-wife a second chance at life, and shot him point-blank in the stomach. Richardson didn't die immediately. He was carried across the street to room 58 of the Astor House Hotel, where a team of surgeons desperately tried to locate the bullet. It quickly became clear that internal infection was setting in. The famous journalist had only days to live. As Richardson lay dying, he and Abby decided to defy McFarland one final time. On December 2nd, with Richardson's life visibly slipping away, a crowd gathered around his blood-stained hotel bed. Among them were the two most famous, highly progressive religious figures in America, Reverend Henry Ward Beecher and Reverend O.B. Frothingham. In a highly emotional, tear-stained bedside ceremony, the ministers legally wed Albert Richardson and Abby Sage. Richardson smiled, kissed his new bride, and slipped into a coma. He died less than 40 hours later. The bedside marriage ignited an absolute media wildfire. Conservative newspapers and traditionalists were deeply outraged. They accused the dead journalist and Abby of celebrating free love and destroying the sanctity of the American home. Daniel McFarland, a brutal stalker and murderer, was suddenly painted by traditionalist media as a tragic, sympathetic victim of a modern, rebellious woman. When McFarland's murder trial began in April 1870, it became the hottest ticket in New York City. The defense team was led by a brilliant, highly theatrical attorney named John Graham. Graham realized that because McFarland had shot Richardson in front of dozens of reliable eyewitnesses, they couldn't deny the physical act. Instead, they pioneered a highly controversial legal strategy. They argued that the mere sight of his wife leaving him had caused McFarland to suffer from an acute case of brain fever, a temporary insanity that completely absolved him of moral and legal guilt. For weeks, Graham put on a masterclass in courtroom manipulation. He wept openly before the jury, pounded on the tables, and delivered an exhausting, multi-day closing argument. He claimed that a husband's home was his castle, and that any man who entered that castle to assist an abused wife was a domestic pirate who deserved to be put down like a dog. Under the laws of 1870, Abby Sage Richardson was legally barred from testifying at the trial. Because the court still partially recognized McFarland as her husband, a wife was prohibited from giving testimony against her spouse. The one person who could have exposed McFarland's decade of brutal violence was forced to sit in complete, agonizing silence as the defense dragged her character through the mud, painting her as a cold, wicked, and unfaithful mother. On May 10, 1870, after weeks of sensationalized testimony, the case was handed over to the all-male jury. They deliberated for just under 2 hours. When the foreman stood and pronounced the verdict of not guilty by reason of temporary insanity, the courtroom erupted into absolute pandemonium. Men stood on chairs, cheering wildly, throwing their hats into the air, and giving the murderer a thunderous standing ovation. Daniel McFarland wept with joy, shaking hands with the jurors who had just validated his violence. The verdict sent a terrifying shockwave through the women's suffrage and legal reform movements across the United States. Prominent figures like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton fiercely condemned the trial, organizing massive public protest rallies. They argued that the verdict effectively legalized the murder of any journalist or citizen who dared to help a woman escape a violent, abusive marriage. Daniel McFarland walked out of the courthouse completely free, though his victory was short-lived. The public infamy and his lingering alcoholism eventually forced him into obscurity, and he died a broken man within a few years. But Abby Sage Richardson refused to let the trial destroy her. She went on to become one of the most successful, highly respected literary editors, authors, and dramatists of the late 19th century, earning her own fortune and cementing her place in New York's cultural elite completely independent of the men who tried to control her. The old New York Tribune building is long gone, replaced by the sprawling urban landscape of Lower Manhattan. But the ghost of the 1869 Newsroom shooting remains, a chilling reminder of a time when the law valued a husband's pride far more than human life. If you enjoyed this look into the dark, controversial intersection of media and justice, please like this video and subscribe to Decades of Darkness. What do you think of this shocking piece of history? Did the jury deliver a just verdict under the social standards of the 1870s? Or did systemic bias allow a brutal stalker to commit the perfect legal execution? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and keep a light on.